Sir, they humiliated my Moa. You have to make stop. Ethan Cole stopped mid-stride. Who humiliated her? Ethan asked. The woman with the red heels. A flicker crossed his face. Where? In your office, she said, pulling his hand. Right now, you have to come. Ethan didn't move yet. Instead, he studied her, then spoke with calm restraint. Annie, that woman is with me. She's my partner, he said. She doesn't treat people like that. Not without reason. She's always been respectful. Your mother, there must be some misunderstanding. There's no reason for her to humiliate your mother. Annie's expression didn't change. It's not a misunderstanding, she said. You just didn't see it. Ethan held her gaze. Then tell me. They were all there, Annie said quickly. Your office, the big table, everyone waiting for you. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. She walked in, looked at my mom, and decided she didn't belong. Annie continued. She thought my mom was the cleaning lady. Ethan said nothing. She pointed at the floor. There was coffee, and she said, you clean that up like my mom wasn't even a person. A pause. My mom told her she works for you, Annie said. She said she's your assistant. Ethan's eyes darkened. She didn't care. Annie continued. She smiled like it was funny. And then people started watching. Annie said, not helping. Just watching. Ethan's hand curled faintly. Some of them laughed, she added. That landed deeper than anything else. They said she didn't look like she belonged there. Annie said they laughed at her clothes like she wasn't important. Ethan exhaled slowly, and then Annie hesitated just slightly. And then what? Annie looked straight at him. She said, my mom was trying to get your attention. Ethan frowned. She pointed at her clothes. Annie said. She said. Annie's voice hardened as she repeated it. Word for word. Women like you dress like that for a reason. Just hoping someone important notices. Ethan's expression froze. She said, my mom was trying to seduce you. Annie continued, but she'd never get the chance because she'd never even be seen. For the first time since she started speaking, Ethan didn't immediately respond. Something in his face shifted sharper now. Colder. She said that. He asked quietly. Annie nodded. In front of everyone, she said, and they laughed. Then Annie pulled his hand again. If you don't believe me, she said, her voice steady. Come see. But don't go in yet. Ethan looked at her for a second longer. Then he nodded. Show me. They moved quickly down the corridor. This time, Ethan didn't slow her. The air grew heavier. As they approached the conference room, Annie stopped just before the door. It was slightly open. Here, she whispered. Look first. Ethan stepped beside her, and what he saw, Lisa Carter was on her knees, her movements controlled, careful, wiping the same spot on the polished floor over and over, as if precision could erase humiliation. Rebecca stood over her, red heels, arms crossed, head tilted slightly, studying her like something beneath consideration. A little faster, Rebecca said lightly. We don't have all day. Around the table, executives sat in practiced stillness. A man leaned back, smirking. Well, at least she knows how to follow instructions. A few quiet laughs followed. Another voice didn't realize we hired based on presentation like that. More restrained laughter. Ethan's gaze hardened. Then Rebecca moved. She stepped closer to Lisa, circling slightly, her heels clicking with deliberate rhythm, her eyes dropped to Lisa's clothes. Rebecca smiled. Oh, I get it now, she said, her voice rising just enough for the room. This is intentional. Lisa paused. Rebecca pointed directly at her. You dress like this on purpose, don't you? She said, hoping someone important might notice. Rebecca leaned in just enough to make it feel personal. But let me save you the trouble, she added, her tone turning sharper. Men like him don't see women like you, she laughed, a full, satisfied laugh. And even if you tried, Rebecca continued, straightening, you'd never get close enough to matter. Ethan didn't blink. Beside him, Annie's hand tightened again. I told you, she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. Ethan pushed the door open. This time he didn't pause outside. He stepped in with Annie still holding his hand. The shift in the room was immediate. Chairs straightened, backs stiffened. Conversations already fragile collapsed into silence. Rebecca turned and in the span of a heartbeat, she transformed. The sharp edge in her posture softened. Her expression warmed. The satisfaction that had filled her face moments ago vanished as if it had never existed. "Ethan," she said, her voice light, almost relieved. "You're finally here." Her eyes flicked briefly to Annie, then away like the child didn't matter enough to register. Then she turned to Lisa. "Oh goodness," Rebecca said, her tone suddenly gentle, almost concerned. "You didn't have to do that yourself. I only meant for someone to take care of the spill." The room followed her lead, heads nodded slightly, expressions adjusted. The earlier tension reshaped itself into something more acceptable, something safer. Lisa was still standing near the table now, the cloth in her hand. She didn't speak. Rebecca stepped closer to Lisa, lowering her voice just enough to sound considerate. "You should have told someone," she added softly. "We all have roles here. No need to overstep." Annie's grip on Ethan tightened. He felt it and he understood. Rebecca turned back toward Ethan, smiling again. "Just a small misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "We were about to begin." Ethan's gaze didn't leave her. Behind him, Annie took a step forward. "That's not true," she said. Rebecca blinked. Then she looked down at the girl for the first time with full attention. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, tilting her head slightly. Her tone still pleasant but thinner now. "You told my mom to clean the floor," Annie said. "You made her get on her knees." Rebecca's smile didn't break, but it tightened. "I think you misunderstood what happened," she replied gently. "I asked for help with a spill. That's all." Annie shook her head. "No," she said. "You didn't ask." Rebecca let out a soft, almost amused breath. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dipping into something patronizingly kind. "Sometimes adults hear things differently than children do." Ethan's eyes flicked toward Annie. "You pointed at her," Annie said. "You didn't even ask her name." Rebecca's expression cooled by a fraction. "I don't recall that," she said lightly. "There were several people in the room. It's easy to confuse details." A man at the table nodded slightly, eager to align. "Yes, it was unclear," he added. Another voice followed, hesitant but supportive. "We assumed she was assisting." Annie looked around the room. Then back at Ethan. "They were laughing," she said. Rebecca's smile faltered. "Now that's simply not appropriate," she replied, her tone sharpening just a touch. "No one was laughing at your mother." "They were," Annie said. A pause. "They said she didn't belong here." Rebecca straightened slightly. "I think this is getting out of hand," she said, turning back to Ethan. "She's a child. She's upset. That's understandable, but we shouldn't let emotions distort what actually happened." Ethan didn't answer. Rebecca stepped closer to him. "You know me," she said softer now. "You know I wouldn't do something like that." Annie stepped forward again. "You said my mom was trying to get your attention," she said. Rebecca froze for half a second, then recovered. "I never said that," she replied smoothly. "You pointed at her clothes," Annie continued. "You said women like her dressed like that for a reason." Rebecca shook her head lightly. "That's not what I said," she replied. "You're repeating things out of context." Annie didn't look at her. She looked at Ethan. "You told her she'd never even be seen," Annie said quietly. "If this moment moved you, take a second to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from. Your voice matters more than you think. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next one." Rebecca's voice lost a degree of warmth. "I think we're done with this," she said. "Ethan, we have a meeting to run." Ethan finally moved. He stopped between Rebecca and Lisa. "Were you asked?" he said, his voice calm. "Or were you told?" Lisa hesitated. Rebecca answered for her. She offered. Rebecca said quickly, "I didn't force anyone to do anything." Ethan didn't look at her. Lisa didn't answer immediately. The room waited, not patiently, never that, but carefully. The way people wait when the wrong answer might cost them something they aren't willing to lose. Ethan didn't rush her. He stood still, his presence filling the space without raising his voice. Without repeating the question, "Were you asked or were you told?" Lisa's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table. For years, her instinct had always been the same. Smooth things over. Reduce friction. Make herself smaller so the moment could pass without damage. But something was different now. Maybe it was Annie standing there. Maybe it was the silence. Or maybe it was the fact that for once someone had asked the question and meant it. I was told, she said quietly. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed exactly where they were supposed to. Rebecca let out a short breath, almost a laugh. That's not fair, she said quickly. You're putting her on the spot. Ethan turned his head slightly. Am I? He asked. Rebecca's tone sharpened. She's uncomfortable. Of course, she's going to say whatever makes this easier. Lisa looked down. That was the moment Rebecca tried to take control back. This has gone far enough. She continued. We're wasting time over a misunderstanding. Ethan's gaze returned to her fully. There's no misunderstanding, he said. Simple, final. Rebecca held his stare for the first time since he had walked in. She didn't immediately respond. Ethan stepped forward, not aggressively, but with intention. You walked into this room, he said, and decided who mattered and who didn't. Rebecca's jaw tightened. I made a judgment call, she replied. That's what people in positions like mine do. Ethan nodded once. Yes, he said, and sometimes those judgments are wrong. A faint shift moved through the room. People straightened, eyes lifted, then dropped again. Rebecca crossed her arms. So what now? She asked. You're going to make a statement, embarrass me in front of everyone. Ethan didn't blink. You did that yourself. That landed harder than anything before it. Rebecca's composure cracked just slightly. This is ridiculous, she said. You're choosing a scene over loyalty. Ethan's expression didn't change. No, he said, I'm choosing integrity over convenience. Silence behind him. Annie hadn't moved. She watched everything. Not like a child, like someone measuring the outcome. Ethan turned slightly, just enough to glance at her. Then back to the room. To everyone here, he said, his voice still calm. This is what happens when silence becomes policy. No one interrupted. No one dared. You saw what was happening, he continued. And you chose not to act. A man at the table shifted uncomfortably. We didn't want to interfere, he said. Ethan looked at him. That's the problem. The man fell silent. Ethan's gaze moved across the room again. Power doesn't just exist in decisions, he said. It exists in what you allow. Rebecca scoffed. Oh, please, she said. Now, it's a moral lecture. Ethan didn't react. He turned to Lisa. You're not cleaning anything else in this building, he said. Lisa blinked. Not because she didn't understand, but because she wasn't used to hearing something like that said about her, Ethan continued. And no one, he added, glancing back at the room. Will ask you to again. Rebecca stepped forward. This is unbelievable, she said. You're undermining me. Over what? A spilled drink. Ethan met her eyes. No, he said, over what you revealed when you thought no one important was watching. That stopped her completely. For a second, there was nothing in her expression, no control, no strategy, just exposure. Then she recovered. You're overthinking this, she said. Quieter now, more controlled. You're letting a moment distort everything. Ethan shook his head. No, he replied. This moment clarified everything. The room held still. Rebecca searched his face, looking for hesitation, for doubt, for something she could use. She didn't find it. You're serious, she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rebecca let out a slow breath. Then she straightened. Fine, she said, if that's how you want to handle this. Her tone shifted again, colder now, more distant. But don't expect this to come without consequences. Ethan held her gaze. I already considered that. Another pause. Then Rebecca looked around the room at the people who had just minutes ago been on her side quietly, comfortably. None of them met her eyes now. That told her everything. She picked up her bag. Enjoy your meeting, she said, and walked out. Her heels echoed down the hallway. Louder this time, sharper until they disappeared. No one moved for several seconds. Then Ethan turned back to the room. Meeting's over, he said. No explanation, no discussion. Chairs shifted. People stood quietly, quickly. One by one, they filed out. No one spoke to Lisa. No one looked at Annie. And no one looked Ethan in the eye until the room was empty except for 3 people. Ethan, Lisa, and Annie. The silence now felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just real. Lisa finally looked up. I'm sorry, she said instinctively. Ethan shook his head. No, he said. You're not. The words stopped her. Annie stepped closer to her mother. And this time, no one asked her to step back. The door closed behind the last person with a soft, deliberate click. For a moment, no one spoke. The room so recently filled with judgment, laughter, and silence, now held something entirely different. Not peace, not yet. Just truth. Ethan stood where he was, looking at the table, the polished floor, the faint trace of what had just happened, still lingering in the air like something unfinished. Lisa remained seated. Her hands rested in her lap now, but they weren't still. Not completely. Years of control didn't disappear in a single moment. Annie stood beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Ethan turned. Look at me, he said. Lisa hesitated. Then she did. There was no fear in her eyes, but there was habit. I should have handled that better, she said quietly. I shouldn't have. No, Ethan interrupted, not sharply, but firmly enough that the sentence couldn't continue. You handled it exactly the way someone survives in a place like this, he said. Lisa blinked. That wasn't what she expected. Ethan took a few steps closer. And that's the problem, he added. The words settled slowly. Lisa looked at him, trying to understand what he meant. Ethan glanced briefly at Annie, then back at her. You weren't wrong, he said. The system is. Silence followed, not uncomfortable, but heavy with something that hadn't been said in that room for a long time. Lisa exhaled quietly. You don't understand, she said. It's not that simple. Ethan didn't argue. I know it's not simple, he replied. That's why it keeps happening. That stopped her. For years, Lisa had learned to navigate spaces like this by minimizing friction. Say less, accept more, keep moving. Because pushing back came with consequences she couldn't afford. I have a job, she said. I have responsibilities. I can't just lose everything. Ethan finished. Lisa didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ethan nodded once. I built this company to run efficiently, he said, to make decisions fast, to remove obstacles. He paused, and somewhere along the way, people became part of that system. Lisa watched him carefully. Now, so, what happens next? She asked. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to the table, ran his hand lightly across the surface where the meeting had been. Then, he turned back. What happens next, he said, is that this doesn't happen again. Lisa gave a small, almost tired shake of her head. That's not how places like this work. Ethan met her gaze. Then it changes. Simple, direct, but not easy. Lisa studied him, trying to decide if he believed what he was saying or if this was just another version of power speaking. Before she could respond, Annie spoke. You didn't know, she said. Both adults looked at her. Annie's eyes were on Ethan. You didn't know they were like that, she continued. Ethan held her gaze. No, he said. I didn't. Annie nodded once. But now you do. It wasn't a question. Ethan's expression shifted slightly. Yes, he said. Annie seemed to consider that. Then she said something that neither of them expected. Then it's your job. The room went quiet again. Ethan didn't look away. Is it? He asked. Annie shrugged lightly. You're the boss. That was it. No speech, no emotion. Just a fact. Lisa looked at her daughter. Something unreadable passing across her face. Ethan let out a quiet breath. I suppose I am, he said. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and typed a short message. Then another. Then he put it away. What did you just do? Lisa asked. Started something, Ethan replied. That didn't reassure her. What kind of something? She pressed. Ethan looked at her. The kind that makes sure no one in this building ever confuses your role again. Lisa frowned slightly. I don't need special treatment. You're not getting special treatment, Ethan said. You're getting what should have already been standard. A pause. Respect isn't a bonus, he added. It's a baseline. Lisa looked down for a moment, then back up. And what about everyone else? She asked. People who don't have someone walking in to stop it. Ethan didn't answer right away because that question that was bigger. Annie watched him, waiting. Ethan finally spoke. Then we fix it for them too. Lisa studied his face again, longer this time, searching for something, finding something. Not certainty, not perfection, but intention. That's a big promise, she said. Ethan nodded. I'm aware. Silence settled again. But this time, it felt different. Less like something ending, more like something beginning. Annie shifted slightly, then looked at her mother. Can we go now? She asked. Lisa let out a small breath. Yes, she said softly. She stood. This time without hesitation, without apology, Ethan stepped aside as they moved toward the door. But just before they reached it, Annie turned back. She looked at him. You did come, she said. Ethan met her gaze. Yes, he replied. Annie nodded once like she had expected nothing less. Then she took her mother's hand and together they walked out of the room. Ethan remained where he was, alone now, but not untouched. He looked around the conference room. One last time, at the chairs, the table, the space where silence had once meant safety, and he understood something clearly. Silence wasn't neutral. It never had been. He adjusted his jacket slightly. Then turned and walked out, not to escape what had happened, but to make sure it didn't happen again. The hallway felt longer on the way out. Lisa walked beside Annie, her steps steady, but slower than usual, as if her body hadn't quite caught up with what had just happened. People noticed them now, not openly, not directly, but in the subtle ways that mattered. Conversations paused for half a second too long. Eyes lifted, then dropped. A few heads turned just enough to confirm what they had already heard because news like that didn't stay inside a conference room. Not in a building like this. Annie held her mother's hand tightly. She didn't look around. She didn't need to. Lisa did, and she felt it. The shift. Not respect. Not yet, but awareness, which in places like this was where everything started. They reached Lisa's desk. The same desk she had sat at that morning. The same chair, the same screen, still glowing with unfinished work. And yet, nothing about it felt the same. Lisa stopped. For a moment, she just stood there looking at it like it belonged to someone else. You okay? Annie asked quietly. Lisa nodded automatically. Yes. Then paused, then corrected herself. I don't know. That was new. Annie didn't respond. She just stayed close. Lisa set her bag down slowly. Her hands hovered over the desk, unsure what to do next. Work, sit, pretend. Nothing had happened. That's what she had always done before. But today, that felt impossible. A voice broke the moment. Lisa. She turned. Mr. Daniels, the senior operations manager, stood a few feet away. He had been in the meeting. He had seen everything and done nothing. Now, his posture was careful, measured. I just wanted to say, he began, then stopped. Lisa waited. So did Annie. Daniels cleared his throat. That situation earlier, it was unfortunate. Unfortunate. The word hung in the air like something too small for what it was trying to contain. Lisa looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she didn't rush to make it easier for him. Yes, she said simply. It was. Daniels shifted. I'm sure it'll all be handled appropriately, he added quickly. Mr. Cole is very decisive. Lisa nodded once. I've noticed. Daniels gave a tight smile. Then, as if realizing he had nothing else to offer, he stepped back. Let me know if you need anything, he said. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked away. Annie watched him go. He was there, she said. Lisa exhaled slowly. Yes, he didn't help. No. Annie frowned slightly. Why? Lisa looked down at her. For years, she had answers ready for questions like that. Careful ones, safe ones. But today, she chose something else. Because sometimes people are more afraid of being wrong, she said, than they are of letting something wrong happen. Annie thought about that, then nodded. Like it made sense in a way she couldn't fully explain. A notification sound broke the quiet. Lisa glanced at her screen. An internal message from Ethan. Short, direct. Come to my office now. Lisa stared at it for a second longer than necessary. Then she straightened. I need to go upstairs, she said. Annie looked up. To him. Lisa nodded. Are you in trouble? Annie asked. Lisa almost smiled. I don't think so. But she wasn't sure and that mattered. They walked to the elevators together. This time the ride felt different. Not because the building had changed, but because she had. The doors opened onto the executive floor. Quieter, colder, more controlled. Lisa had spent years avoiding unnecessary time here. Now she walked into it directly. Annie stayed close. They reached Ethan's office. The door was already open. He stood near the window, looking out over the city, hands in his pockets, still composed. He turned when they entered. "Close the door," he said. Lisa did. The click echoed softly. Ethan gestured toward the chairs in front of his desk. "Sit." Lisa hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then she sat. Annie remained standing beside her. Ethan noticed but said nothing for a moment. He just looked at them, not evaluating, not measuring, just looking. Then he spoke. "What happened in that room," he said, "wasn't an isolated incident." Lisa's hands tightened slightly. Ethan continued. "It was a pattern," he said. "One that's been allowed to exist." Lisa didn't disagree. She couldn't. "I need to know something," Ethan added. She met his gaze. "Have there been other times?" The question was simple, but it carried weight. Lisa hesitated, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she had too many. "Yes," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "Why didn't I hear about it?" Lisa almost laughed. "Not because it was funny. Because it wasn't. Because people like me don't report things like that," she said. "Why not?" Lisa held his gaze. "Because we know how those stories end." Silence. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't argue. "Best case," Lisa continued. "Nothing changes." A pause. "Worst case. We lose everything." Annie looked between them, listening. Ethan exhaled slowly. "That changes today," he said. Lisa shook her head slightly. "You can't fix everything." Ethan didn't disagree. "No," he said, "but I can fix what happens under my name." That landed. Lisa studied him, trying to understand what that actually meant. Ethan stepped forward. "There's going to be a review," he said. "Policies, conduct, accountability." Lisa didn't look convinced. "People will say the right things," she said. "They always do." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll make sure they do the right things, too." Annie spoke. "Then, are you going to fire her?" The question hung in the room. Ethan looked at her. Direct, honest. "Yes," he said. Lisa inhaled slightly, not in shock, but in recognition of what that would mean. "Consequences, real ones," Ethan continued. "And anyone else who thinks what happened today was acceptable," he added. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something new. Annie nodded once. "Good," she said. Simple, certain. Ethan's expression softened. Just a fraction. Then he looked back at Lisa. "You don't have to apologize for today," he said. Lisa opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't. The office felt quieter after the decision was spoken out loud, not empty, just settled. Ethan stood near his desk, his posture unchanged, but something in the room had shifted. Words once said, had a way of rearranging everything around them. Lisa sat still, absorbing it. Not the promise, the certainty. Annie beside her seemed to accept it more easily. Children often did. They didn't complicate truth the way adults learn to. "Good," she had said, and somehow that had carried more weight than anything else. Ethan walked back to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. "Get legal and HR in conference room B," he said. 15 minutes, a brief pause. "Also, security." Another pause. "Yes," Ethan added. "Now." He released the button. Lisa watched him carefully. "This is moving fast," she said. Ethan looked at her. It should have moved sooner. There was no argument in his tone, just acknowledgement. Lisa exhaled slowly. "And Rebecca?" she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "She won't be returning." Simple, final. Lisa nodded once, though her expression remained guarded. "People are going to talk," she said. "They already are," Ethan replied. That was true. Downstairs, across floors, through hallways, and whispered conversations, the story was spreading. Not in full detail, not accurately, but enough. Power shifts always made noise. Ethan stepped around his desk and leaned against it slightly, arms crossed. "This isn't just about her," he said. "It's about everything that allowed her to think she could do that." Lisa held his gaze. "And you think one decision fixes that?" "No," Ethan said. "But it starts something." Annie looked between them. "What if people don't change?" she asked. Ethan glanced at her. "Then they don't stay." No hesitation, no softening. That answer sat differently in the room. Lisa noticed it. "That's going to cost you," she said. Ethan gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I'm aware. Silence followed. Not uncertain, just real. Then a knock at the door. Ethan straightened. Come in. The door opened and 3 people entered. A woman in her 50s sharp suit. Composed expression hour. A man with a tablet legal. And behind them, a security officer. All 3 paused briefly when they saw Lisa and Annie in the room. Then they adjusted. Professional controlled. Mr. Cole, the HR director said, conference room B. Ethan replied, we'll continue there. They nodded. No questions. They turned and left. Ethan looked back at Lisa. Stay, he said. She blinked. In the meeting? Yes. Lisa hesitated. That's not my place. Ethan's expression didn't change. It is now. That landed harder than expected. Lisa glanced at Annie, then back at Ethan. You're sure? She asked. Ethan met her gaze. I don't bring people into rooms like that unless they belong there. A pause. You do. Lisa didn't respond immediately because that wasn't just an invitation. It was a shift. Annie tugged lightly at her sleeve. You should go, she said. Lisa looked down at her. And you? She asked. Annie shrugged. I'll stay here. Ethan shook his head slightly. No, he said. She comes with us. Lisa frowned. That's not appropriate. Ethan's tone remained calm. She saw what happened, he said. She understands more than most people in that room will. Annie looked at him. You mean I can come? She asked. Ethan nodded once. Yes, that settled it. Lisa stood slowly, not out of hesitation this time, but out of awareness. They walked together toward the conference room. The hallway felt different now, not just because people were watching, but because people were pretending not to. Doors half closed, conversations cut short, eyes that flickered, then disappeared. They reached conference room B. Inside, the 3 from before were already seated, documents open, devices ready, prepared. Ethan entered first. Lisa and Annie followed. The room shifted again, not dramatically, but enough. Ethan took his seat at the head of the table. He gestured, sit. Lisa sat, Annie beside her. The HR director glanced briefly at the child, then back at Ethan. He noticed. She stays, he said. No one questioned it. Ethan leaned forward slightly. What happened this morning? He began. Is not an incident. It's evidence. The legal advisor looked up. Of what? He asked. Ethan's gaze was steady. Of a failure in culture, he said. And accountability. The HR director nodded slowly. We'll need statements, she said. You'll have them, Ethan replied. He turned slightly toward Lisa, starting with hers. The room's attention shifted. Lisa felt it, all of it, but this time, she didn't shrink from it. She met their eyes and began. As she spoke, the room changed again. Not because of policy, not because of authority, but because someone who had always been expected to stay quiet didn't. And for the first time in that building, the truth wasn't being filtered. It was being heard. Lisa's voice didn't shake. That surprised her, not because she wasn't used to pressure, she had lived inside it for years, but because this was different. This wasn't about schedules or deadlines or keeping things running. This was about telling the truth in a room where truth had always been optional. She walked in, Lisa said, her tone steady, measured. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't give me time to explain. She gave an order. The HR director typed quickly. Exact wording, she asked. Lisa didn't hesitate. She pointed at the floor and said, you clean that up. Now, the words sounded smaller here than they had in the moment, but the impact didn't shrink with them. The legal advisor glanced up. And your response? I told her I was your executive assistant. Lisa said, nodding slightly toward Ethan. I clarified my role. And then Lisa paused, not because she didn't remember, because she remembered too clearly. She dismissed it. Lisa said. She spoke over me, treated it like it didn't matter. The HR director nodded. And the others in the room? Lisa's gaze shifted briefly across the table. They didn't intervene, she said. A pause. Some of them agreed with her. Silence followed. Not the heavy, suffocating silence from before. A different kind. The kind that forms when something undeniable has been placed in the center of the table. Ethan watched her, not as her employer, as someone learning something he should have already known. Did anyone challenge her? The legal advisor asked. No, Lisa said. Did anyone support you? Lisa thought for a moment, then shook her head. No. Annie shifted slightly in her chair. They laughed, she said. The room turned toward her. Lisa glanced down. Annie, it's okay, Ethan said quietly. Annie looked at the people across the table. They laughed at her clothes. She continued. They said she didn't look like she belonged there. The HR director stopped typing for a second, then resumed. Did you hear that directly? She asked. Annie nodded. Yes. The legal advisor leaned back slightly. Children can misinterpret tone. She didn't, Ethan said. The interruption was calm, but final. The advisor stopped. Ethan's gaze didn't leave him. Continue, he said to Annie. Annie did. She told my mom she was trying to get your attention. She said. She said women like her dressed like that for a reason. The room stilled. Even the typing stopped. Lisa closed her eyes briefly. Not in shame, in recognition. Because hearing it out loud changed something. The HR director looked at Ethan. Do we have any recording of the meeting? She asked. Ethan shook his head. No. A pause. Then this becomes a credibility issue, the legal advisor said. Ethan leaned forward slightly. No, he said, it doesn't. The advisor frowned with respect without documentation. We have a pattern, Ethan interrupted. We have multiple witnesses and we have a clear breakdown in conduct. The HR director nodded slowly. That's enough to act, she said. The legal advisor didn't look convinced. It's enough to initiate action. He clarified, not necessarily to justify termination without risk. Ethan's expression didn't change. What kind of risk? He asked. Reputational, the advisor replied. Financial legal pushback. Ethan considered that for exactly 1 second. Not acting carries its own risk, he said. No one disagreed because they couldn't. Ethan turned slightly toward Lisa. You're not the only one, he said. Lisa frowned. What do you mean? Ethan glanced at the HR director. She understood immediately. There have been informal complaints, she said carefully. Nothing escalated to this level, but similar concerns. Lisa's expression shifted. Why wasn't anything done? The HR director held her gaze. Because they weren't reported formally. Lisa almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. Ethan saw it. That changes, he said. The HR director nodded. Well, open a formal investigation, she said. Effective immediately, the legal advisor added. And will need full cooperation. Ethan didn't look at him. You'll have it. Annie leaned slightly toward her mother. What does that mean? She whispered. Lisa answered quietly. It means they're going to look at everything. Annie nodded. Good. The word was simple, but it landed again. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Here's what happens next, he said. The room focused. Rebecca Stone is suspended from all involvement with this company, he continued. Effective immediately. The legal advisor opened his mouth, then closed it. Because Ethan wasn't asking, he was informing. Her access is revoked, Ethan added, glancing briefly toward the security officer. Badge, system permissions, everything, the officer nodded. It'll be done, the HR director made a note. We'll need to notify her formally. I'll handle that, Ethan said. No one questioned it. Silence followed, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was decisive. Lisa sat back slightly, not relaxed, but steadier. Annie looked up at her. See, she said softly. Lisa placed a hand over hers. Yes, she replied. Ethan watched that, not the words, the moment. Then he stood. The meeting followed. Chairs shifted. Documents closed. Decisions, real ones, had been made. Keep me updated, Ethan said. The HR director nodded. You'll have a full report. The legal advisor gathered his things. Well, proceed carefully, he said. Ethan met his gaze. Well, proceed correctly. That ended it. They filed out one by one until the room was quiet again. Ethan looked at Lisa, then at Annie, and for the first time since the morning began, there was no doubt left about what came next. The room emptied, but the weight of it didn't leave with the people. It stayed in the air, in the silence, in the way Lisa sat a little straighter than before, like something inside her had shifted, not fully healed, but no longer willing to bend the same way. Ethan remained standing at the head of the table. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. He was thinking, not about the meeting, not about Rebecca, about something deeper. Patterns, blind spots, things that had existed under his authority without his attention. That more than anything unsettled him. Annie slid slightly off her chair and stood. "Is it over?" she asked. Ethan looked at her. "Yes," he said. She nodded once like she expected that answer. Lisa stood more slowly. Her body felt heavier now, not from fear, but from release. The kind that comes after holding something in for too long. "What happens to me?" she asked. It wasn't insecurity. It was reality. Ethan didn't hesitate. "You go back to your job," he said. "The one you've been doing." Lisa held his gaze. "And everyone else?" she asked. "They adjust," Ethan replied. That answer was simple, but Lisa knew better. "People don't change that fast," she said. Ethan nodded slightly. "No," he agreed, "but they change when they understand the cost of not changing." That was closer to the truth. Annie looked between them. "Does that mean they're scared?" she asked. Ethan considered that. "Yes," he said. "Some of them are." Annie thought about it. "Good." Lisa glanced down at her. "You don't like them being scared?" Annie shook her head. "I don't like them being mean," she said. "If they have to be scared to stop, then okay." Lisa didn't respond because there wasn't an easy correction to that. Ethan walked toward the door. "Come on," he said. "I'll walk you down." Lisa blinked. "That's not necessary." Ethan opened the door. "I know," he said. "I'm still doing it." There was no argument after that. They stepped into the hallway together and immediately the difference was visible. People noticed, not subtly this time. Heads turned, eyes followed. Because now it wasn't just a rumor. It was visible. The CEO walking beside her. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. Lisa felt it. Every step, every glance, her instinct was to shrink again. To make it smaller, to make it less visible, but Annie's hand slipped into hers and held. That stopped her. They reached the elevator. No one else stepped in. Even though there was space, the doors closed. The ride down was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Just aware, Annie leaned lightly against Lisa. Ethan stood beside them, looking forward. Then he spoke. "You've been here how long?" he asked. Lisa answered without thinking. 3 years, Ethan nodded. "And before that, 2 jobs, she said. Retail during the day, cleaning at night." Ethan absorbed that not as information, as context. "And you stayed," he said. Lisa gave a small shrug. "I needed stability. A pause and I was good at it. That mattered." Ethan glanced at her. "I know." Lisa looked at him. That wasn't something she heard often. Not out loud. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors opened to the main floor, and the moment they stepped out, the building reacted, not dramatically, but noticeably. Conversations paused. People turned and this time they didn't pretend not to see. Ethan walked forward, Lisa beside him, Annie between them, a quiet formation, but powerful. They passed the front desk. The receptionist straightened immediately. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cole." Ethan nodded once, then kept walking. Lisa noticed something. For the first time, the receptionist looked directly at her. Not past her, not through her, at her. "Good afternoon," she said. Lisa paused for half a second, then nodded back. "Good afternoon." Small, simple, but different. They reached the exit. The glass doors reflected them back. 3 figures standing in the same space. Ethan stopped. Lisa did too. Annie looked up. "Are we leaving?" she asked. Lisa hesitated. She had work, responsibilities, things waiting. Ethan answered. "No," he said. "You're going home early." Lisa frowned. "I can't just." "You can," Ethan said. "And you will." She shook her head slightly. "I have things to finish." "They'll still be there tomorrow," he replied. Lisa looked at him, then at the building behind them, then at Annie. For years, the answer had always been the same. Stay, finish, endure. But today, that didn't feel as necessary or as right. Annie squeezed her hand. "Let's go," she said. Lisa exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Okay." Ethan stepped back slightly, giving them space. Lisa started toward the door, then paused. She turned back. "Thank you," she said. Ethan shook his head. "No," he replied. "You showed me what I should have seen. That mattered more." Lisa held his gaze for a second longer. Then she left, Annie beside her. The door closed behind them. Ethan remained where he was, looking at the reflection in the glass at the building, at himself. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about control or power or outcomes. He was thinking about responsibility, and how much of it he had ignored. He turned and walked back inside because the day wasn't over, not even close. It had just started. The doors closed behind Lisa and Annie, and the city swallowed them. Inside, the building adjusted. Not all at once, but in pieces. Ethan walked back through the lobby, his pace unchanged, but the atmosphere around him no longer felt the same. People moved out of his way as they always did. But now there was something else layered beneath it. Awareness, speculation, and something closer to caution. He didn't acknowledge it, didn't slow, didn't stop. He stepped into the elevator alone. The doors shut quietly. For a moment, there was nothing but the low hum of movement as the car began to rise. Ethan stood still, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed ahead. Then, almost without realizing it, his reflection caught his attention. The glass gave him back exactly what the world saw. Composed, controlled, untouchable. He held that image for a second, then looked away because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure it was accurate. The elevator opened. The executive floor greeted him with the same silence it always had, but now it felt exposed. Ethan stepped out immediately. His assistant approached him. "Mr. Cole," she said, her tone steady but tight. "Miss Stone is here." Ethan didn't stop walking. "Where?" "In your office." That made him pause. Not visibly, but enough. "I revoked her access," he said. The assistant nodded. She insisted. Security didn't escalate. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly. Of course, she insisted. Of course, they didn't escalate. Patterns again. "I'll handle it," he said. The assistant stepped back. Ethan continued down the hallway. This time, the doors weren't just doors. They were witnesses. He reached his office. The door was closed. He opened it. Rebecca stood by the window. She didn't turn immediately like she knew he was there. Like she had decided to control even this moment. "You move fast," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Ethan closed the door behind him. "That's the job." Rebecca turned then. Her expression was composed, perfectly arranged, but not warm. "Not anymore. You embarrassed me," she said. No greeting, no pretense, just that. Ethan didn't respond. Rebecca stepped closer. "I had people calling me before I even got to the elevator," she continued. "Do you have any idea what that looks like?" Ethan Meteros. "Yes, that was it." No apology, no explanation. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. "You made a decision without talking to me first," she said. "I saw enough." Her jaw tightened. "You saw a moment," she corrected. "Not context." Ethan didn't move. "I saw who you chose to be. When you thought it didn't matter, that landed." Rebecca looked away briefly, then back. "You're letting a child dictate your judgment," she said. Ethan's voice stayed level. "No," he replied. She revealed it. Rebecca let out a short breath. "Do you hear yourself?" she asked. "You're risking everything over optics." Ethan shook his head. "This isn't optics." "Then what is it?" she pressed. A pause. "Accountability." Rebecca laughed. But there was no humor in it. "You don't build what you've built by worrying about everyone's feelings," she said. Ethan nodded slightly. "That's exactly the problem." Silence. Rebecca studied him. Really studied him this time. Like she was trying to find the version of him she knew. The one who would have handled this differently. She didn't find him. "You've changed," she said. Ethan didn't deny it. "No," he said. "I stopped ignoring things. That was worse." Rebecca crossed her arms. "So what now?" she asked. "You cut me off. Just like that." Ethan's answer came without hesitation. "Yes." The word didn't echo, but it didn't need to. Rebecca stared at him. For a moment, the control slipped. Not fully, but enough. "You think this ends clean?" she asked. Ethan didn't respond. "You think people won't question this?" she continued. "You think the board won't care?" Ethan stepped closer. "They will," he said. Rebecca's expression sharpened. "And you're fine with that?" "Yes." Another pause. This one longer. Rebecca shook her head slowly. "You're making this personal," she said. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. It already was. That stopped her because she hadn't expected that answer. Not from him. Not like that. Rebecca picked up her bag. Her movements were slower now, measured, not defeated, but recalibrating. "You're going to regret this," she said. Ethan didn't react. "Maybe," he replied. That wasn't what she expected either. She looked at him one last time, then walked to the door. Her hand rested on the handle. She paused. "You chose them," she said. Ethan answered without hesitation. "I chose what you refused to see." Rebecca opened the door and left. This time, there was no performance, no audience, just the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. Ethan stood alone again, but not the same. He walked to the window, looked out over the city. It hadn't changed. It never did, but something else had. Behind him, his phone buzzed. A message from the board. Short, direct. "We need to talk." Ethan read it once, then set the phone down. Because of course they did. Power always responds when it feels threatened. He looked back at the city, then at his reflection in the glass, and this time he didn't look away. The message didn't sit quietly. It stayed on the desk, the screen dimming and lighting again as if reminding him it was still there. "We need to talk." Ethan didn't respond. Not yet. He stood by the window a moment longer, then turned, picked up his phone, and walked out of his office. The hallway was no longer pretending. People moved, but not naturally. Conversations dropped when he passed. Doors that had been slightly open now closed more deliberately. He noticed. He didn't react. His assistant stood as he approached. "They're all here," she said. "Boardroom." Ethan nodded once. Good. He didn't ask who. He already knew. The boardroom was on the same floor. Large, quiet, designed for decisions that affected people who would never sit inside it. Ethan opened the door. They were already seated. 5 of them, different ages, different styles, same posture, control. They didn't stand. They didn't greet him. That told him everything. Ethan walked in, closed the door behind him, and took his seat at the head of the table. No one spoke immediately. Then, "Let's not waste time," one of them said. "Thomas Grant. Old money, older influence." Ethan leaned back slightly. "Then don't," he replied. A glance passed between 2 of them. Then another voice. "You terminated Rebecca Stone." Not a question, a statement. Ethan nodded. "Yes." Another pause. Measured. Careful. "You did that without consulting the board." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I did." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "That's not how this works." Ethan met his gaze. "It is when it happens under my authority." The temperature in the room shifted. Subtle, but real. A woman across the table spoke next. "Let's be clear," she said. "Rebecca represents a significant investment channel. Her removal isn't just personal, it's structural." Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her finish. Then he spoke. "What happened this morning wasn't structural," he said. "It was behavioral." Thomas exhaled. "This isn't about behavior," he said. "It's about impact." Ethan's eyes sharpened slightly. "They're the same thing." "No," Thomas replied. "One affects people, the other affects outcomes." Ethan leaned forward. "They both do." Silence followed. The kind that meant the conversation had crossed into something less negotiable. Another board member, Richard Hale, no relations, spoke carefully. "We've received calls," he said. "Partners, investors, they're asking questions." Ethan nodded. "They should." Richard frowned slightly. "That's not reassuring." "It's not supposed to be," Ethan replied. Thomas's patience thinned. "You made a unilateral decision based on a single incident," he said. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "It wasn't a single incident." Thomas leaned back. "Then where's the documentation?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "You'll have it." The woman across the table interjected. "Ethan, this is bigger than internal policy. You've created exposure. If this escalates, it will," Ethan said. That stopped her because he wasn't trying to avoid it. He was acknowledging it. Thomas studied him. "You're willing to risk the company's position over this." Ethan held his gaze. "I'm correcting the company's position because of this." A pause. Longer now. More serious, Richard spoke again. "Let's assume," he said carefully, "that your assessment is correct, that there was misconduct. There are procedures for that." Ethan nodded. "I initiated them." "After you made the decision," Richard pointed out. "Yes." Thomas leaned forward again. "That's the problem," he said. "You acted first." Ethan didn't look away because waiting would have sent the wrong message, and now you've sent another one. Thomas replied. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Which is that leadership is reactive, Thomas said. Emotional, unpredictable. Ethan let that sit for a second. Then no, he said that leadership is accountable. The word landed harder than expected because it wasn't just an answer. It was a position. The woman across the table spoke again. More measured now. Accountability is important, she said. But so is stability. Ethan nodded. I agree. Then explain how this creates stability, she said. Ethan didn't rush. He looked at each of them. One by one, then answered. Because it sets a boundary, he said. Clear, visible, non-negotiable. Thomas shook his head. That's idealistic. Ethan's expression didn't change. It's necessary. Silence again, but this time it wasn't resistance. It was consideration. Richard leaned back. You're forcing a shift, he said. Ethan nodded. Yes. Richard studied him. That comes with consequences. Ethan held his gaze. I know. Thomas exhaled slowly. Then let's be direct, he said. If this costs us partnerships, if it affects valuation, you're accountable for that. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes. The room went still. Because that answer wasn't strategic. It was personal. The woman glanced at Thomas, then back at Ethan. You're taking full responsibility, she asked. Ethan nodded. I already did. That changed something. Not completely, but enough. Thomas leaned back, studying him differently now. Not just as a CEO, as a variable. You're betting on this, he said. Ethan didn't deny it. Yes, a pause. Then Thomas nodded once slowly. Then we'll see how it plays out. That wasn't approval, but it wasn't opposition either. The meeting didn't end with agreement. It ended with acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. Ethan stood. The others followed more slowly. No one rushed out. No one lingered unnecessarily. As they left, one by one, the room emptied again. Ethan remained just for a moment. Then he reached for his phone, scrolled, stopped. A message thread, unopened from earlier. He stared at it briefly, then locked the screen because for the first time, he wasn't thinking about what came next. He was thinking about what he had already chosen and what it would cost. The boardroom door closed behind the last member with a quiet finality. Ethan didn't move immediately. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reflective, the kind of silence that comes after a decision has already been made and can't be taken back. He walked slowly back to his office. Not rushed, not delayed, just deliberate. The hallway felt different again. Not tense this time, measured. People weren't just watching now. They were recalibrating because the line had been drawn and everyone understood it. Ethan entered his office and left the door open. That by itself was unusual. He rarely left doors open. Not in this building, not in this role. But today, closed doors felt like part of the problem. He walked to his desk, sat down, and for the first time all day paused, not to think, to feel. It didn't last long. His phone buzzed again. This time, not the board. A different name, Lisa Carter. He looked at the message. Short, simple. I wanted to let you know we got home safe. Ethan stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then typed back. Good. Take tomorrow off. He paused, then added. That's not optional. He set the phone down. Something about that exchange felt grounding. Real, not strategic, not calculated, just human. A knock at the open door pulled him back. He looked up. It was Daniels, the same man from earlier, the same man who had said nothing when it mattered. Now he stood at the doorway, unsure if he should step in. Mr. Cole, Daniels said. Ethan didn't invite him in. He didn't need to. Daniel stepped inside anyway, carefully. I wanted to follow up on earlier, he began. Ethan leaned back slightly. Go ahead, Daniel swallowed. There's concern, he said. Across teams. People are uncertain. Ethan didn't react. They should be, he said. Daniels blinked. That's not usually how we handle internal situations, he replied. Ethan's gaze sharpened. How do we usually handle them? Daniels hesitated, then answered honestly. Quietly. That was the word, the one that explained everything. Ethan nodded once. That's the problem. Daniel shifted his weight. With respect, sir. That approach has worked. Ethan didn't raise his voice. For who? That stopped him. Daniels opened his mouth, then closed it. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Worked for efficiency? He asked. Or worked for accountability? Daniels didn't answer because he couldn't. Ethan continued. What happened this morning didn't start today, he said. It didn't end because I walked into a room. Daniels listened more carefully now. It existed, Ethan said. Because people believed no one would challenge it. A pause and they were right. That landed. Daniels looked down briefly, then back up. What do you want me to do? He asked. That question that was different, not defensive, not avoiding, direct. Ethan considered it, then answered. I want you to decide what kind of environment you're willing to be part of, he said. Daniels frowned slightly. That's not a directive. No, Ethan agreed. It's a choice. Silence. Daniels processed that slowly. Then, and if people choose wrong, he asked. Ethan's answer was immediate. Then they won't be here. Daniels nodded, not fully convinced, but no longer resisting. I understand, he said. Ethan held his gaze. Do you? Another pause. Then Daniels gave a small, honest answer. I'm starting to. That was enough for now. Daniels turned to leave but stopped at the door. There's one more thing, he said. Ethan waited. People noticed. Daniels added. You walking with her with Lisa. Ethan didn't react. That matters, Daniels said. Then he left. Ethan sat still for a moment, then stood. He walked back to the window. The city looked the same, unchanged, indifferent. But inside this building, something had shifted. Not completely, not permanently, but enough to be felt. His phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from our. Formal investigation initiated. Statement scheduled. Ethan read it, then locked the screen. Because process would take time. Systems always did, but culture that changed in moments. Moments like this. He looked at his reflection again, not searching this time, recognizing. Then he spoke quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Silence isn't neutral. The words stayed because now he understood exactly what they cost. The building didn't sleep that night. It never really did, but this time it stayed awake differently. Lights remained on longer than usual across multiple floors. Offices that typically emptied by early evening still held quiet conversations. Screens glowed. Emails moved faster. Words like review, conduct, and liability traveled through the system like a second pulse. Ethan remained in his office. He had taken off his jacket at some point, though he didn't remember when. It rested over the back of his chair, untouched, like a version of himself he hadn't decided whether to put back on. A file lay open on his desk. Not financial, not strategic personnel, names, positions, notes, patterns. He read them slowly, carefully. Not like data, like evidence. A knock came soft, controlled. Come in. The HR director stepped inside. She carried a tablet and a thin folder. We've started collecting statements, she said. Ethan gestured for her to continue. She placed the folder on his desk. Initial findings are consistent, she added. Different wording, same structure. Ethan didn't open the folder yet. How many? He asked. C7 so far, she said. From different departments, different time frames. That was enough. More than enough. Ethan nodded once. And before today, he asked. The HR director hesitated. Informal concerns, she said. Nothing escalated. Ethan looked at her. Why? She didn't avoid the answer. Because no one believed it would lead to anything. Silence. That matched what Lisa had said. That was the pattern. Ethan finally opened the folder. The statements weren't long. They didn't need to be. Each one carried the same weight. Dismissal, assumption, silence. He closed it. This doesn't stay internal, he said. The HR director nodded slowly. Well, need to be careful, she replied. If this becomes public, it will, Ethan said. She studied him. You're certain? Eden Metagazi. Yes. A pause. Then she nodded again. Then we control how it happens, she said. Ethan leaned back slightly. No, he replied. We make sure it's honest. That was harder, and they both knew it. She didn't argue. I'll prepare the next phase, she said. Ethan gave a small nod. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing, she said. Ethan looked up. Several employees have requested to speak directly, she added. Off record, Ethan considered that, then answered, "Set it up." She nodded and left. The door remained open. Ethan sat there for a moment, then stood. He walked out. The hallway was quieter now. Less movement, more thought. He didn't go back to the boardroom. He didn't return to his desk. He walked past offices, past departments, past people who now watched him differently, not just as authority, as consequence. He stopped near the operations floor. Lights still on. A few employees remained, working or pretending to. When they saw him, they straightened, not out of routine, out of awareness. Ethan didn't speak immediately. He looked around, at the space, at the people, at the system. Then he said, "Go home." They blinked, confused. One of them spoke. "We still have, it can wait," Ethan said. Not harsh, not loud, but final. They didn't argue because something in his tone made it clear this wasn't about productivity. It was about reset. One by one, they began to gather their things quietly, respectfully, not rushed, not afraid, just aware. Ethan turned, and kept walking. He reached the elevators, pressed the button, waited. For the first time all day, he allowed himself to slow down. The doors opened. He stepped inside alone again. The ride down was quiet but not empty. His mind moved through the day. The room, the voices, the silence. Annie's words. "If you don't stop her, you're just like her." He closed his eyes briefly, not in regret, in recognition. The doors opened. Lobby still lit, still moving, but softer now. Ethan walked out into the night. The air was cooler, cleaner, real. He stood there for a moment, looking at the building behind him, at the glass, at the reflection. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, opened a new message, paused, then typed. Not to the board, not to Lisa. Tomorrow won't be the same. He stared at it, then added. That's on me. He sent it, and for the first time since the morning began, Ethan wasn't reacting. He was choosing, and that made all the difference. Morning came differently, not quieter, not calmer, just clearer. Lisa stood in the small kitchen of her apartment, staring at her phone longer than she needed to. Tomorrow won't be the same. That's on me. She had read the message 3 times already. Not because she didn't understand it, because she didn't. That made it harder. Annie sat at the table, swinging her legs slightly, watching her. Are you going back? Annie asked. Lisa didn't answer immediately. For years, that answer had never been a question. Of course, she was going back because she had to, because not going back meant losing something she couldn't afford to lose. But today, it felt different. Yes, Lisa said finally. Annie nodded. Good. Lisa glanced at her. You're not worried. Annie shrugged. You said things are changing. Lisa gave a small breath. I did. Annie looked at her. Then we'll see if it's true. Simple, direct. Lisa turned away slightly, reaching for her coffee. It wasn't cold today. That felt like something. The building looked the same. Glass, steel, unmoved by anything that had happened inside it. But the moment Lisa stepped through the doors, she felt it. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. People noticed her, not with the quick, dismissive glances from before. With attention, measured, curious, and something else, respect. Not fully formed, but starting. Annie walked beside her, holding her hand like she always did. But this time, Lisa didn't feel like she needed to hide it. They approached the front desk. The receptionist looked up and smiled. Not the professional automatic smile from yesterday. A real one. Good morning, Miss Carter, she said. Lisa paused just for a second, then nodded. Good morning, Annie noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. They stepped into the elevator. Other people joined this time. No one avoided them. No one stepped out. No one pretended not to see. The ride up was quiet, but not uncomfortable, just aware. When the doors opened, the executive floor felt different. Not colder, not distant, more careful. People greeted her, not loudly, not dramatically, but directly. Morning. Good to see you. Small things, but they mattered. Lisa walked to her desk, set her bag down, turned on her screen. The same routine, but not the same feeling. An email notification appeared almost immediately from our. Please report to conference room B at 10 a.m. She read it once, then closed it. Annie climbed into the chair beside her. Are we staying? She asked. Lisa hesitated, then nodded. For a while, Annie smiled slightly, satisfied. At exactly 10 a.m., Lisa stood outside conference room B. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She opened the door and walked in. The room was already filled. Our legal, several employees, and Ethan. He stood at the head of the table. Just like before, but not the same. He looked at her, gave a small nod. Come in. Lisa stepped inside. Annie followed. No one questioned it. That alone said enough. Ethan waited until everyone settled. Then he spoke. What happened yesterday, he said, was not an exception. The room was still. It was a reflection, he continued, of what this place has allowed. No one interrupted, because no one could. Ethan's gaze moved across the room. We're not moving forward until that changes. Clear, direct, final. The HR director stepped in. We've collected statements, she said. There's a consistent pattern of behavior. She looked around. If anyone has something to add, this is the time. Silence. Then a man near the back spoke. I saw it, he said. Lisa turned slightly. He had been in the room yesterday. He hadn't said anything then, but now I should have said something, he added. No one reacted, but everyone heard it. A woman beside him spoke next. This wasn't the first time, she said. Just the first time it was visible. More voices followed, not all at once, but enough. Enough to confirm what had already been understood. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't guide. He let it happen because this was the change. Not policy, not enforcement, voice. When the room quieted again, Ethan spoke. Accountability doesn't start with punishment, he said. A pause. It starts with acknowledgement. He looked at Lisa, then at the others. Now we decide what kind of place this is going to be. No one spoke, because that decision wasn't his alone. Not anymore. Annie leaned slightly toward her mother. They're listening now, she whispered. Lisa looked at her, then at the room, and for the first time she believed it. The room didn't move immediately after Ethan finished speaking. Not because people didn't understand, but because they did. And understanding, real understanding, had a way of slowing everything down. Lisa sat still, her hands resting lightly on the table around her. People who had once avoided eye contact were now looking directly at one another. As if trying to measure what came next. Not instructions, not orders, responsibility. Ethan didn't rush the silence. He let it settle because for the first time silence in that room wasn't hiding anything. It was holding something. Then he stepped forward. Here's what happens now, he said. The shift was immediate. Structure, clarity. People leaned in slightly, not physically, but mentally. We don't go back to normal. Ethan continued. Because normal is what allowed this. A pause. We build something better. The HR director nodded, already prepared. Effective immediately, she said. We are implementing a zero-tolerance policy on workplace discrimination, harassment, and abuse of authority. That wasn't new language, but today it meant something. There will be mandatory reviews across all departments, she added. Anonymous reporting channels, direct escalation paths. Lisa listened. She had heard versions of this before, but never like this. Never after something had actually changed. Ethan continued. And this isn't a document, he said. It's a standard. He looked around the room. If you see something like yesterday and say nothing, you're part of the problem. No one argued because no one could. A man near the front nodded slowly. We understand, he said. This time, it didn't sound like compliance. It sounded like awareness. Ethan turned slightly. Good, he said, because this only works if it's real. Silence again, but lighter now. Not heavy, not defensive. Something closer to forward. Annie shifted in her chair, then whispered to Lisa. They're different. Lisa glanced at her. Yes, she said quietly. They are. The meeting began to break naturally. Not abruptly, not dismissed, just complete. People stood, chairs moved, but something had changed in how they moved, less guarded, more aware. A few approached Lisa carefully, respectfully. I'm sorry, one woman said. Lisa looked at her, and for once, she didn't feel the need to make it easier. I know, she replied. And that was enough. Another man nodded at her, not speaking, just acknowledging that mattered too. Annie watched all of it carefully, like she was checking if the world had actually shifted or if it was pretending again. Ethan remained near the head of the table, not commanding, not directing, just present. When the room had mostly cleared, Lisa stood, Annie beside her. They walked toward him. No hesitation now, no distance, just equal ground. Lisa stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then it felt different, she said. Ethan nodded. It is. Lisa studied him. You're not just fixing what happened, she said. No, Ethan replied. I'm fixing what allowed it. That was the difference, and they both knew it. Annie stepped forward slightly. Does that mean it won't happen again? She asked. Ethan looked at her. He didn't rush the answer. No, he said honestly. It means when it does, it won't be ignored. Annie thought about that, then nodded. Okay, she said, because that was enough. Lisa placed a hand gently on Annie's shoulder. Ready to go? She asked. Annie nodded. They turned toward the door. Then Lisa paused. She looked back. Yesterday, she began, then stopped. Not because she didn't have words, because she didn't need them. Ethan understood anyway. He gave a small nod. Lisa returned it. Then she walked out. Annie beside her together. Not smaller, not quieter, just two whole. Ethan remained where he was, the room now empty, but not the same. He looked at the table, the chairs, the space where something had shifted, not because of policy, not because of power, but because someone had refused to accept what everyone else had learned to ignore. He walked to the window. The city stretched out in front of him, unchanged, still loud, still indifferent, still moving. But inside, something had been corrected. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to matter. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, opened a blank message, then stopped, closed it, because not everything needed to be said again. Some things just needed to be lived. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole wasn't just running a company. He was choosing what it stood for. And that choice would last longer than anything he had built before. This story reminds us that silence is never neutral. When we choose not to speak up against injustice, we become part of it. True leadership is not measured by power, wealth, or control, but by the courage to stand up for those who cannot defend themselves. Sometimes it takes the honesty of a child to expose what adults have learned to ignore. And in that moment, we are all given a choice. Protect comfort or protect what is right. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration.